I noticed, Russ noticed, I'm sure many of you have noticed, and Glenn Greenwald noticed that since the selection of Tim Walz, the new Che Guevara, Tim Walz, the best leftist who ever lived, Tim Walz, a lot
the Segway Diaries are coming out this
yeah,
fall.
right. Yeah, the Segway Diaries. Exactly. Yes. Ever since the selection of Tim Walz, a lot of progressives have been ecstatic about the Kamala ticket. And so Greenwald tweets out here, online left liberals already extracted all the value there is to get from feigning anger over Gaza. They fortified their radical brand, profited from traffic, etc. It was always predictable they would drop it soon as the election approached, and they had to work to elect Democrats. So Glenn tweeted that out on August 8th. That was 2 days after the selection of Tim Walz for VP. He follows that up with, it's repellent enough to watch people scream genocide for 10 months, then not even pretend to care about it any longer. It's worse still to outright lie and deceive followers by claiming Kamala said she's open to an arms embargo towards Israel. That was directed at Emma Vigeland, who is quoted below. So her tweet that he's quoting there is, here's some better news from New York Times. Kamala Harris reportedly met with the co-founders of the Uncommitted movement before the rally. The rally in question is the rally, of course, where she said, I'm speaking to the pro-Palestine protesters, which we'll get to in a minute. This is sort of a memento time-ordered segment here. And indicated that she was open to an arms embargo towards Israel. Then introduced those activists to members of her staff. These need to turn to commitments. So that's what Glenn was quote tweeting there. Glenn, please reply with evidence. So she did not take kindly to being quote tweeted there. Glenn, please reply with evidence that we were pretending to care about Gaza. We must have been playing a long game by covering it every day on the Majority Report. The New York Times says she's open to a meeting where Uncommitted will request an arms embargo. Thoughts on Trump's position on the genocide? So, the but Trump defense, right?
Yep.
So she gives her supporting evidence here, this from the organizers themselves. So she quotes this. The organizers here say, both Elabed and Allaway thanked the vice president for her openness to engaging with the demands of uncommitted voters. Elabed also thanked Governor Walz for recognizing and supporting uncommitted Democratic primary voters. Okay, so this reminds me a lot of when we interviewed the railroad workers when they were being screwed over by Joe Biden. And the railroad workers were grateful that some of the staffers from Cory Bush's office floated the idea of passing an amendment alongside the shitty terms of the TA. And we kind of checked them a little bit on the air. We said, no, they only did that so that you would be convinced they're fighting for you, but they're not. And I was a little frustrated with them, just like I'm a little frustrated with this activist here for not realizing that she's being gaslighted. But
right.
There's only so much anger you can muster for like people who are in it. This is an activist. The railroad workers, they're workers. Like there's only so much you can expect them to be aware of and to know. If you are like Emma Vigeland, let me just make this point. On the other hand, if you are privileged enough to be in a position where you get to run your mouth about politics for a living, as Emma is, as Glenn is, as we are now, thanks to all of you in our audience, you have a responsibility to see through this bullshit. And this was such obvious bullshit, as we covered in a previous segment, and we'll get more into this time. But they're doing here what the squad did to the railroad workers, what Ryan Grimm did to the railroad workers. Hey, look, the railroad workers were happy that we offered an amendment to the TA.
Exactly.
Hey, look, the activists are grateful that they got some lip service from Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, knowing full well, if you know anything about anything, much less a professional political commentator, you know Kamala's Israel policy is not going to change. If you know anything about anything. And so it's just so sleazy and low to trot out these people who have skin in the game, who are desperate, and say, hey, look, they appreciate Kamala. Why don't you? Why don't we? Because we know better, because it's our job to know better.
Right. I think these activists are put in a position where they're doing this dance because on the one hand, in the best of cases. Some of them are just cynically trying to make a living off a cause. But the ones who are sincerely committed to the cause, who are not just careerists, they're trying to put pressure on these politicians while not alienating them to the point that they have no access or influence. I think what a lot of them don't realize is you might maintain access, but you don't have any influence.
Exactly.
All the influence you have is you will make them feel that they have to pretend to care in order to get people who follow your comments to vote for them. So they
Exactly.
want you to say things like this, and they get you to say things like this by pretending they might do something differently, even though they absolutely will not. So as you say, it's hard to blame the activists. They're trying, and a lot of them are naive. And that's how you get co-opted. That's how you start out with a well-intentioned movement that ends up being an arm of the Democratic Party. That's
Sunrise
why
Movement. Look at the Sunrise Movement. That's exactly
Sunrise
what happened.
Movement. I think that's I think it was Jill Stein who said the Democratic Party is the graveyard for radical movements.
That was actually Shama said that.
Oh, Shama said that?
Yeah. Yep.
I don't mean to steal it from Shama.
Stolen valor.
Stolen valor. But that's exactly what it is, and it's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Like you look at Cori Bush, I think she went into Washington sincere. I remember when she camped out on the steps of the Capitol to get new provisions into, I think it was the CARES Act. I think she went in wanting to shake things up. I think once you're there, man, you get your mind right. I think it's a very road to hell is paved with good intentions thing. I think a lot of them, they compromise this because they're told you got to do this to get that and to get this, or you're going to get nothing. And before you know it, you're John Conyers. You're just completely, from having been this real legit activist, you're just a tool for the powers that you went in there intending to fight against. And I think you can see how that happens here. If Kamala gets her way, uncommitted will be out there sending you emails about how you have to vote for,
right? Yeah, exactly.
People in the midterms, and they just want to suck them in.
Well, that's the thing. They get, and this is what you said, and that's a great point. They give you access to string you along for votes. That's why they give you. If they don't give you any access, then they can't string you along, right?
And it's hard, I'm sure, for a lot of these people not to be impressed. Oh, wow.
Oh, look,
I'm
they're
meeting
listening
with Kamala Harris.
Right.
Wow. You know what? You know who I just got a phone call from? Chuck Schumer called me. I think it's hard for people who, most of these people are not from famous families or backgrounds. They're not used to engaging with people with that kind of public profile. I think they get a little swept away by it, too.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, and these protesters, tend to be a little younger, right? So, they're a little more susceptible to flattery and things like that. But yeah, no, it's very obvious that her policy is not going to change. And so in response to this, Glenn responds, "You are lying with the goal of helping to mislead leftist voters into voting for Kamala by inventing that she's open to an arms embargo with Israel. Here's her top national security advisor saying you're full of shit and that she wouldn't." And he quotes Phil Gordon. "Vice President has been clear she will always ensure Israel is able to defend itself against Iran and Iran-backed terrorist groups. She does not support an arms embargo on Israel. She will continue to work to protect civilians in Gaza and to uphold international humanitarian law." So he's basically saying that's the Biden line. That's our line. There is no change. We, of course, are not going to cut off arms to Israel, as I'm sure Emma Vigeland knew very well. And that's the thing. It's just impossible to believe they don't know better. So she says, "This is my opinion on the statement. Yes, I do think Harris is more movable on Israel than the man who promised to annex the West Bank for Miriam Adelson's money," meaning Trump. "Like when media figures take certain positions after getting Peter Thiel cash, for example." Oh,
you're talking to me all wrong. It's the wrong tone.
Yes, swipe at Glenn Greenwald for going on Rumble there. Okay, so look, the butt Trump defense.
That's all they got.
That's all they got, and the reason it doesn't hold here is that we are not under any illusions that Trump will be any better on this. Greenwald is neither. He has said repeatedly Trump is just as bad on this issue, if not worse. The question is not who's better. This is not an OTB room where we have to pick a horse to bet on in the next race. If you're serious about building a meaningful political movement, there have to be red lines past which you cannot cross. And if genocide is not one of them, then you cannot, you may as well not have any standards whatsoever. Right. This is not about whether Trump would be better. This is about whether or not you as a political movement saying you're welcome in our movements if you go and pull the lever for a genocide supporter like Kamala Harris or Joe Biden or this fucking Tim Walz character. You have to have certain standards, and if this is not one of them, then what you're doing is meaningless. You're just picking your favorite candidate in the election. You're treating this like it's just a day at the racetrack, and it's not a day at the race. Like, you have to be, you have to have more foresight than that and more seriousness than that.
Well, this is what I've always said about these commentators. Most of them don't come from backgrounds like we come from. I came up rough. You came up kind of, lower middle class, I get the impression.
I was middle class. My parents were basically peddlers. They were street peddlers who parlayed their career as street peddlers into a small jewelry business, which is, I mean, if their prime earning years were any other decade but the 90s, we would have been working class, lower working class. Like, you can't earn a middle class living selling beaded jewelry now. It's impossible. But during the 90s, enough people had enough money where, like, hey, you could buy a house.
The internet ruined a lot of that also. It made it too available. It saturated those markets. These commentators, they're all from pretty elevated backgrounds, man. A lot of them, they're from pretty rich families. They went to very good schools. A lot of them have law degrees. And I'm not saying any of that is by definition disqualifying, but chances are, if that's where you come from, your perspective is that the system is there to work for you. That is something that got into your understanding of the world from your earliest childhood. Coming from where I come from, I've always seen the police as antagonistic. I've always seen it that way. I've never seen them as being there for me. So that basic idea that you really hear articulated from Black Lives Matter, I mean, that's not just a Black perspective. It's a class perspective.
Greenwald says, well, that's a dumb lie. That's a sign of your desperation because you're lying off the backs of those in Gaza, all to help Kamala, meaning her previous tweet there where she says, but Trump. I don't care enough to dispute it. Just admit you're a DNC hack unconditionally. Stop lying that Kamala will do anything different with Israel. When I think that was spot on. Okay, so now we're going to go back to a week before Tim Walz was selected VP, to this great piece of literary mastery here by Cenk Uygur, who wrote an op-ed in Newsweek. Don't fall for the misinformation campaign. Josh Shapiro is the progressive choice for VP. So this all kind of started around the Veep stakes where, okay, Biden's out, Kamala's in. It's a chance for us to reset. Okay, don't forget, Kyle Kalinske had endorsed Jill Stein over Joe Biden. They just couldn't go there for Biden, which sucked because they need to back the blue for November. That's how you grow your channel. That's the lesser evilism. That's the biggest pool of voters, Democrat voters. Most of our viewers are Democrat viewers. So when it switched from Joe to Kamala, I think a lot in this space saw an opportunity to sort of reset. And the first real test was, can we voice some approval of the VP pick? And Uygur ended up hedging so much to the point where he actually tried to gaslight his viewers into thinking that Josh Shapiro was the progressive choice for VP. And he got challenged on this point by one of his own people here. I don't know who this is on TYT, but the Vanguard boys, who we'll get to in a minute, tweeted this out. Really starting to think Cenk Uygur was just paid to put his name on that Josh Shapiro puff piece that he wrote for Newsweek. So here he is being challenged on this point. How could you say Josh Shapiro is the progressive pick?
That case over someone like Walz, who has many of these same accomplishments and many more. You mentioned Shapiro is cutting taxes for corporations. Walz raised them. Walz also raised the capital gains tax. Walz, and an issue that you like to bring up constantly, you did it tonight, you always talk about it, paid family leave. Walz did that. He could then go on the trail and say, hey, I did that in my state, let's do it nationally. Shapiro doesn't have that in his arsenal.
But I'm not arguing against Walz. It feels like this debate is about the versus A, right? Is Shapiro the progressive pick or a progressive pick? And by the way, I didn't put the title on the piece. Newsweek did that.
No, that's in the copy.
Okay.
That's in the copy. You wrote that. You said it's got to stop. Shapiro is the progressive pick.
Okay.
Okay, well, that's true. This is from the article. My fellow progressives, it's got to stop, meaning the hand-wringing over Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro is the progressive pick, my highlighting there. Why? Wall Street banks, blah, blah, blah. We don't have to read all that. But he asked the question about Israel. So is he a monstrous right-winger on Israel? Not at all. This is Cenk's op-ed. Not at all. Of course not. His position on Israel is correct, though his optics are terrible. Look at this line of bullshit. Like all sane people, Shapiro supports a two-state solution and a free, independent Palestine. Well, that's not the position of all sane people. A one-state solution is the completely sane, rational, and moderate, normie position on this. No apartheid. Anti-apartheid is pretty normie. That's not radical. That's what a one-state is. Anyway, we don't have to litigate all that now because we'll never get done with this. As for his support for Israel, consider his remarks about its leader. Blah, 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 Netanyahu, horrible guy. Okay, skip down to the next paragraph. This is unbelievable. This is the guy who he just said was the progressive pick. It's true that Governor Shapiro has been a reactionary about campus protests against Israel. He came out strongly against them, saying we wouldn't tolerate people dressed up in KKK outfits. Then he issued a dumb executive order calling for state employees who protest in a scandalous or disgraceful way to be fired. So this guy compared student protesters to Klansmen and then signed an executive order threatening people's jobs if they protested genocide impolitely. This is the guy who he just said 2 paragraphs ago was the progressive pick for VP. No doubt anything that criticizes Israel would have qualified, though we never got to find out by that time. All the protests against Israel had been disbanded and the students arrested. So that's who he tried to sell.
And setting a scandalous or disgraceful standard that is intentionally vague. You could claim that about anything because it's an executive order. That's up to the executive to decide what qualifies as that. Yeah, that sounds very progressive. Yes.
Well, turns out he debased himself for nothing because, of course, just a couple days later, Kamala Harris chooses Tim Walz for VP, and Cenk, holy shit, I can't believe she picked Tim Walz. She's going to win. That's a bold choice. Democrats are never bold. The attitude is even more important than the pick, even though the pick is excellent. If she's the type who picks Walz, she might even try to get things done. So turns out the bullshit puff piece about Shapiro was just hedging. To be like, hey, in case she picks this IDF goon, I have to articulate to my audience that, no, he's progressive because we still have to be able to show for Democrats in November. Just manufacturing consent for a total monster unnecessarily. But turns out it's Walz. So what does he do? Immediately start the presses on the T-shirts. Fun shirt to celebrate the Walz pick. We tried to capture his attitude here. Balls to the walls at shoptyt.com for $30 a piece. You can get your Tim Walz T-shirt. Kyle Kulinski, August 6th, right after the Walz announcement. Let's fucking go.
Hey, Kamala, you didn't mention my queen, Marianne.
No, he didn't. Kamala objectively made the best possible pick. Look at that policy record, dog. We're so back. The policy record here, the universal free meals. You can
suck on a tampon.
Yeah, right, yeah. Shove a tampon up your ass. Free school meals, legal weed, carbon-free electricity, tax rebates, paid family leave, paid sick leave, banned conversion therapy, red flag laws for guns. This is the liberal wish list, okay? So he's very excited about Tim Walz. Crystal Ball, very excited about Tim Walz. Let's go. All the people who were pulling away from Biden, now that it's Kamala, now that it's Walz, all of a sudden now we're going to sheepdog people back in. the aforementioned Emma Vigeland. Kamala Harris has picked the most progressive VP choice of her finalists, the one who will complement any priorities on child care and child poverty, the one labor leaders preferred, and who said the uncommitted movement should be heard. Oh, there we go with the heard again. This was 2 days before her spat that we read at the top of the segment. This is an unambiguously optimistic signal. The Vanguard boys have been really cashing in on this Tim Walz pick. Good for them. I mean, they needed a boost. But you look at their last 7 videos have been Walz, everything Walz all the time. They were very excited about Tim Walz. They put this video out here. Tim Walz gets picked as VP. Here's a little excerpt from that. They are all in on Tim Walz and Kamala Harris now.
This was the best pick Kamala Harris could have possibly made. Tim Walz being a heartbeat away from the presidency absolutely is enough for me to 100% be excited about and vote for Kamala Harris in November.
There you go. They're all in.
That's it. They're all in. They're all in. That's all it took. Hadn't they endorsed Jill Stein previously? Weren't they?
I don't know. I mean, I don't stay up to date enough.
Yeah,
but
we haven't done a segment on them in a very long time for obvious reasons.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is why, people ask, most people understand, but some people, why you slam these commentators? This is why, because it's so fucking obvious that they're all just waiting to sheepdog people back into the Democratic Party. Any pretenses at radicalism they might make, it's just a grift. None of these people mean anything. They have no convictions. They just go where they think the money is going to be. And hey, man, look at those pod save guys. I told you what, they got people paying over $200 freaking to see those schmucks live. Right. Everyone's trying to get in on that. Everyone wants to make that money. It is much easier to make that money if you play along with the establishment. And then if you pretend to have some kind of outsiderness, some kind of independent judgment, then you can suck in some of the people who like to see themselves as not as Kool-Aid drinking and indoctrinated as the MSNBC folks. That's what the Vanguard is for. That's what the Majority Report is for. That's what the Young Turks is for. It is for people who are going to be too embarrassed to be running around touting what Joy Reid said last night. It gives them another way to essentially have the same politics, but feel cool about it.
Yes, but it was not so easy to feel so cool for so long because, of course, Kamala Harris, the day after the Tim Walz pick, Kamala's wins, posted in a remarkable moment, Vice President Kamala Harris just demolished individuals protesting at her rally tonight. We all know who those individuals were. They were ceasefire protesters, Arab voters in the key swing state of Michigan. Just a very, very brief reminder of how that went.
Intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking.
I'm speaking. Oh, no, not cool.
There we see the charmer who, according to at least one op-ed from an intern's father, ordered everyone in the office to say good morning, General, upon her entrance when she was AG, and never spoke to any of the interns. And the interns were instructed not to look her in the eye. Very much like royalty.
There you have it. Well, this complicates things. Ugh, horrible, says Kyle Kalinske. Oh, just yesterday we were on board. Now you put us through this. Yep. All she had to do was say, I hear you. When I'm president, we'll have a permanent ceasefire. We're going to stop the war and bring peace. At least half of Democrats think Israel is committing a genocide. Act like it. Translation, why couldn't you just bullshit? Why couldn't you just bullshit the base? This way I can keep bullshitting my viewers, right?
And as many people keep on pointing out, well, you're the vice president now.
Right.
Why you do it now? She's stealing, Trump's idea about the tips. I got to look into whether this is true. There's been a meme going around that she was the deciding vote on empowering the IRS to go after tips. I have to look into whether that's true. But at the very least, hey, man, you think it's such a good idea? Why don't you do it now? Why do people have to wait? Do these things now. Why don't you do a ceasefire now? And we, as we saw in our last show, literally the same day that she said they're working around the clock for a ceasefire, they committed to another $3.5 billion in aid to Israel, military aid.
That's right. The Vanguard. This will kill her momentum. Momentum. You endorsed her yesterday. 1 day ago, you were on board. This will kill her momentum. Tone deaf and entitled. Oh, she did the "I'm speaking" line, says Emma Vigeland, that she used against Mike Pence in the 2020 VP debate against anti-genocide demonstrators in Michigan. Girl bossery used for evil once again.
Oh, and Crystal retweeted it.
Yes.
See, folks, they're all friends. They're all buddies.
Update. So now she posts the update. Here is some better news from the New York Times. This is the same thing she tweeted in response to Greenwald the day after. This was the organizers saying that they got Kamala's ear. Mm-hmm. But this tone is still shitty. This could be avoided if she actually articulates where she stands on this issue. It's a genocide, pretty important.
Oh, you think?
I mean, not important enough to be make or break for you guys, apparently, because Tim Walz with his free school lunches, apparently that's the price of a Gaza child now, is a free school lunch. So now if we can get free school lunches for our kids, we can let Israel bomb Gaza's kids. I think the Palestinian people have been sold out enough over the last several decades. I think it's time to say that unless you are squarely anti-Israel to the point where you promise an arms embargo on day one, we will not vote for you. Otherwise, you're prioritizing your child's school lunch over their children's safety. That's what that is. She's indeed hamstrung by being in the lame duck administration, but she could still be saying more. I'm very hopeful about a Harris-Walz ticket, says Cenk Uygur, but I'm not naive. There is a 0% chance they're going to change our policy on Israel.
I'm listening.
Both Dems and Republicans have promised AIPAC they'll never touch the money. What did you think all those campaign donations are? Okay. How can you
why are you hawking these T-shirts?
Right. Then what are you hawking the T-shirts for? How can you write in the same tweet, I'm very hopeful about a Harris-Walz ticket, but there's a 0% chance they're going to change policy on Israel?
So what are you hopeful about?
They're bombing schools. They just bombed a school. They bombed, I think, 3 schools last week. And they've been bombing safe zones regularly for the past several months. Oh, I'm very hopeful about their ticket, but I'm not confident at all. In fact, I know that they're not going to do anything to stop the most obscene crime of our lifetimes. How do you write that? You write that if you don't really, at the end of the day, give a shit. It's the only way you could possibly type those 2 sentences in the same tweet. So, lucky for them, Kamala gave it the old second try. She got another opportunity 2 days later when she was protested again, and this time she handled it so much better.
Country, we're here to fight for our democracy.
It was not scripted at all either.
No.
It was right off the top of her head.
Which includes respecting the voices that I think that we are hearing from. And let me just say this on topic of what I think I'm hearing over there. Let me just speak to that for a moment, and then I'm going to get back to the business at hand. So let me say, I have been clear. Now is the time to get a ceasefire deal and get the hostage deal done. Now is the time. And the president and I are working around the clock every day to get that ceasefire deal done and bring the hostages home.
Around the clock every day, except when I have to be out here.
Yeah.
So I respect your voices, but we are here to now talk about this race in 2024.
Okay, I respect your voices, but, now let's get back to the business at hand, which is not genocide, but fear-mongering about Project 2025. Apparently in that same $62,000 Tiffany's necklace that you wore in the fundraising pitch video.
I keep noticing that, but you know what? Of everything I've put on social media, I think my post about that has gotten the most lib pushback because they're very programmed to interpret anything like that as a criticism of her looks, of her appearance, right? To which, the very easy response is, I promise you, if a male candidate put out a fundraising appeal with his $62,000 Rolex held up to his face,
Right.
they'd meme it.
Right. They would meme it. Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about that. The Vanguard guys, though, were very impressed. So much better. See, that's it. You throw them a line of bullshit. We respect you. We hear you. Now back to the Project 2025 show. That's how it's done. Kyle Kulinski, Kamala's shocking reaction after new Gaza protests. So Kyle came out and made a video reacting to this. We're going to play a little bit of this.
Well, I respect your voices, but we are here to now talk about this race in 2024.
Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts. First of all, let's state the obvious. That is so much better than what she did the first time.
So much.
I mean, that was a breath of fresh air compared to her first reaction, where she basically accused the people of wanting Trump to win and said, yeah, if you want Trump to win, then go ahead and keep protesting for Gaza.
Much
like,
smoother line of bullshit.
Jesus Christ, that's dark. That's such a dark reaction.
That's so mean.
So this is...
That's so mean.
You don't
I'm a
have
nice
to
guy.
mean it.
I'm not a mean guy.
You just have to say it.
Right, you just have to be nice. You have to say it nicely. You can't be mean. I'm not mean. My brand is nice. Don't be mean. Be nice. You don't have to mean it, but be nice.
Let me speak to that real quick. I know you guys are concerned about this. I am too.
Yeah.
We got to get a ceasefire. We got to get a
Yeah.
ceasefire. And we got to bring the
yeah,
hostages home.
no, that's
Right.
what they're going to do.
Yeah.
That's the right reaction.
They're going to.
That's the right reaction. The one part I didn't like is that she said, "Oh, me and the president have been working on this," and it's like, Joe Biden is not interested in a ceasefire.
Oh, so the one part I didn't like is that it's total bullshit.
She is.
So the one part I didn't like about this is that she says we've been working on a ceasefire when it's clear the president is not determined to get a ceasefire. So everything was great except for the fact that she was full of shit. Except for the fact that she was full of garbage, it was great. It was perfect.
We got to get a ceasefire, and we got to bring the hostages home, right?
Yeah.
That's the right reaction. That's the right reaction.
Preach.
The one part I didn't like is that she said, "Oh, me and the president have been working on this," and it's like, Joe Biden is not interested in a ceasefire. He's not interested in a ceasefire. So now, look, if I'm going to split hairs here, what I would say is this, and Adam Johnson has written a lot about this, and I think his take and his breakdown is brilliant. He says the way that Biden interprets a ceasefire is actually pure sophistry and pure goalpost moving. So when Biden says we want a ceasefire, he doesn't mean the same thing that you and I mean and pro-Palestine protesters mean when he says ceasefire. He
like
means
ceasefire.
Yeah, let's pause the fighting again and have the hostages freed, and then effectively allow Israel to go back to bombing Gaza again after that. That's not. I mean, you could say it's a pause. That would be a pause. But when we say ceasefire, what we mean is a permanent ceasefire, right? And so then the question remains about Kamala. When she says we need a ceasefire and we need to bring the hostages home, does she mean it in the Biden way of ceasefire? Or does she mean it in the sincere pro-Palestine protester way of ceasefire? And look, that's yet to be seen.
Okay, well, if that's yet to be seen, then how on earth could you support her candidacy? If you don't know what she means by ceasefire, how on earth could you be shilling for her this hard because of fucking Tim Walz? It makes no sense. Moron. It makes no sense if you give a shit. What are you talking about? Yeah, we don't know what she means by that. Okay, so you don't know what you mean by that, then stop supporting her. Stop supporting. It's that simple.
I gotta say, it is kind of amazing to me to see them all go right back into the fold, even from a marketing angle. And hey, maybe there is that broad an audience for pseudo left politics, for MSNBC politics with a hipper branding. Maybe there is. I don't think so. I mean, you got it's a pretty crowded lane, isn't it? The Democratic Party pseudo progressive grift. Aren't a lot of people eating out of that trough? Is that really the best place to go? Especially, look, I mean, Kyle's got his built-in audience for his warm bowl of oatmeal style of broadcasting. But what a like scrappy small channel like the Vanguard get out of it? Like, do you really think you're going to be able to get in on that action in a significant way? I mean, you'd get a little bounce on anything right now. It's the Super Bowl. Like, it doesn't really matter as long as you're covering this subject. You're going to have an unusual amount of activity right now. But what happens after November 5th? Like,
well, backing a horse is good for engagement. Look, everybody who supports any candidate at all is a little pissed at us right now. I mean, the Kamala people were never on our side. The
That's
Trump
true.
people had a little honeymoon with us after the debate and all that. The RFK people don't like us. The Jill Stein people are frustrated with us, even though we're not against Jill Stein. So yeah, I mean, look, there is a sort of incentive to pick someone and back them. And I
guess,
think,
yeah.
and look,
but,
I mean,
but once you back one, doesn't that bite you in the ass too? Like, because you got people who back the others are going to be mad.
Look, these are Democrat channels. The TYT is a Democrat channel. They all came about in 2016 when, don't forget, 88% of Bernie supporters in 2016 who would be inclined to like the Young Turks and a show like this one here, 88% of them voted blue. So, like, mathematically, like, your biggest audience is still the progressive Democrat loyalist audience. And so I'm not saying that is entirely what is motivating them, but they are certainly, if they are not consciously aware that this is grifting bullshit, then that's because they've been doing it too long to know that it's conscious at this point.
Kyle knows.
I mean, come on.
Knows. If anyone wants to see Kyle straight out looking his audience in the eye, metaphorically, and lying to them, go watch our video, Kyle lies for Marianne or something like that.
Yeah.
You put that in as keywords, I'm sure that video will come right up. He literally just lies about what's in an article that he's covering, but will not put on the screen because it doesn't match what he's saying.
It doesn't match what he's saying. Exactly.
Yeah. No, he's a straight up grifter. We've seen it.
Yeah. It's very obvious, as we pointed out several times in this segment, that there is no policy shift incoming. That is from her own advisor, tweeted that out when some of you guys tried to make it look like she was signaling that she's for an actual ceasefire. And if you are ambiguous on that, which you admit you are, then how do you lend support to this ticket? And just a reminder, not to take this segment in a dark turn, but this just broke this morning. Gaza notifications. The Israeli army killed 4-day-old twin babies, Asir and Aysel, along with their mother, Jumana Farid Abu al-Kamsan, this morning. They killed twin babies and their mother while this guy, so you see the father there with their birth certificates. They were killed when he left to pick up their birth certificates. He went to get their birth certificates. They were born 4 days ago. And when he got back, they had all been killed. And those two babies look a lot like my two babies. My 5-year-old twins, they looked exactly like them. Exactly like them. And so if you are not clear and unambiguous in your condemnation of this terrorist state, as a candidate, you should get no support from anyone of good conscience, period. Why these people? This is why I cared enough to put this segment together. How you can make a living as a so-called progressive political commentator and be wooed back into supporting Kamala Harris because Tim Walz passed free school lunch. Come on, man. That is a bunch of fucking bullshit. That's just fucking bullshit. And you know it's bullshit. I know you know. I believe these people see these images and they feel pain. I believe that's why Kyle endorsed Jill Stein to begin with. What do you think? He wanted to do that? It was too much at one point. Why is it not too much anymore? Why? You're really going to fall for this fucking Tim Walz bullshit? I mean, are you serious? Are you serious? This has inspired my meme. That says it all right there. Says it all right there. And that goes back to the very beginning when Greenwald says online left liberals already extracted all the value there is to get from feigning anger over Gaza. Well, it sure seems that way. It sure seems that way.
Exactly. They fortified their radical brand, profited from traffic. Exactly. That's it. That's it. And now they see their best grift is to go pretend that this represents a shift in policy. So they're going to the next grift, which, I mean, it's really disgusting.
Yeah. And just to bring it back to it, just to reiterate, you know, the people of Gaza have been sold out for 75 years. Right? They have taken their priorities. I think they've been deprioritized enough to the point where at this moment you have to be able to say, if you are not correct on this, you get no support, no matter what. I don't care how many fucking school lunches you pay for. That just has to take a back seat to this now. And if it doesn't, then you're fucking dog shit. You're just dog shit. You're worthless. You're fucking worthless. And do you hear us saying, well, Trump would be any better? You hear us saying a kind word about Donald Trump on this? No, that's not the point. The point is not that's what I mean. This is not a situation where you have to back somebody, but in their mind, that's where the money is, to back somebody.
And hey, look, when we say we're not supporting Jill Stein, this is what we mean. We don't feel comfortable because when we put out a call for Jose, we have people fly in because we put out the call. Yep. We don't feel comfortable urging our people to get involved in that way because of the disorganization that we know people who personally witnessed in the New York ballot drive. That's why they're not on the ballot here, whatever. Yes, it's an unfair system. The LaRouches got on the ballot. They're beloved by the people at the election board. I'm sure they hate the LaRouchites more than they hate the Greens, and they had their shit together, and the Greens didn't. So we're not comfortable saying, hey, go work on that. But, hey, man, sure. If Jill Stein were going to be on the ballot in my state, which she is not, sure, I'd vote for her. She's not on the ballot here.
Yeah, and I would even say, look, if you have disposable income, and it's not going to hurt you to throw her a few bucks, then fine, go ahead. Sure. Why not? If she's on the ballot in your state, sure, vote for her. Why not? Like, I don't put her in the same category as Trump, Kamala, and RFK. Like, to support any of those three candidates is unconscionable. It's unconscionable.
Right.
Kamala, Trump, or RFK. You hear that, everybody? Not shilling for anybody here. Either of those three, it's unconscionable, given their support for this terrorist fucking state.
Right.
Unconscionable. Jill Stein, I just think it's probably it's a drain of resources. If money's tight, don't do it.
Right.
Look, if you got money to burn, you want to burn it on Jill Stein, go ahead, do it. Fine. Right. I'm not saying don't.
You're not throwing your money into a bad cause.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's just a different. Yeah. I just don't think it makes sense for someone who's living paycheck to paycheck to be setting aside money for the Jill Stein campaign. But that is the extent to which I would criticize her. Anybody who supports Israel, that's a moral issue.
No, and that's the RFK thing too. That's why it's not even you can't even get to the other issues. He's such a maniac on that. To discuss his policy on that is that issue is a deal breaker. And just before we wrap this up, I got to say, when I see a New York cop show, it always because I saw them as a child and I haven't really seen them since. It's always amazing to me how little they've changed, like structurally in the formula, how much. Right. And I'm like, wow, people still want to see that, the procedural, the villain of the week, like they still watch. Wow, they're still doing like Starsky and Hutch, only they got modern cell phones and stuff. That's how I felt watching those clips, because I didn't see them until you showed them. What is this, 2016?
Right.
Like, what? I'm amazed they're doing this, because really this online left was primarily born from the Bernie Sanders campaign. We've all been through all this. We've all been through the Democratic Party says they want to give you health care, and they don't. They say they want to raise the minimum wage, and they don't. Like, I thought we all learned this, didn't we? Didn't we all go on this journey and find out that, oh no, when faced with the possibility of doing that, they will fight more viciously than they will ever fight against any Republican to make sure that doesn't happen. And now we're back here talking about reading the tea leaves of what Kamala's farts mean.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
We're back there. Well, no, she actually, her eyebrow lifted a little bit when someone said ceasefire. So I actually think she's open to it. What do you like? Really? Really? That's the conversation you're having at this late date? The fucking Democrats?
Yeah. No, these are the people
man.
who let a parliamentarian block a minimum wage increase.
Right.
You think they're going to stand up to Israel?
Yeah.
You think they stand up to Israel? They wouldn't stand up to the parliamentarian to get a modest minimum wage increase.
The unelected parliamentarian that George W. Bush faced with the same situation, fired.
Fired. Yeah.
Put one in that wouldn't give him any trouble.
Exactly. Yeah. Just quite pathetic.
Please clap.